Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
The air in the chapel at General Hospital was thick, not with the usual sense of antiseptic and despair, but with a fragile, burgeoning hope. It was a hope that felt audacious in a place so accustomed to tragedy, a small, defiant flame in a vast darkness. This was the day of the baptism, a day meant to mark a new beginning, a cleansing, a sacred promise for an innocent child caught in the complex web of its family's legacy. General Hospital recap for Friday, October 31st, reveals that Michael Corinthos rattled Veronica Ronnie Bard while Tracy Quartermaine set up the will and Nina Reeves betrayed Portia Robinson. At the Metro Court, Drew Cain informed Nina that he was going to tell the Bobbies. That he flashed back Michael shooting him, though it wasn't true. Nina claimed that would boomerang and upset about Drew making effects worse for Willow Tate. Over with Sonny Corinthos, he principally advised Michael to get a grip on his wrathfulness toward Willow or differently he could look shamefaced in court. Sonny was pleased when Michael kept his cool around Drew moments latterly, but Michael knew it'd be harder when it was time for Drew to subscribe the Mance papers. Latterly, Nina sat down with Sonny and revealed there was another suspect with motive that no bone knew about. After Nina offered updates on Drew blackmailing Portia Robinson, she admitted she could call attention to Portia as her friend. Sonny, on the other hand, could use this information, so Nina suggested pointing the cutlet at Portia could help both Michael and Willow. At Bobby's, Ronnie allowed. She honored Jack Brennan as Joey, but he claimed she was incorrect, though he fooled that maybe they knew each other in another life. That was G.H. Penn's clever way of admitting McKenna and Slazak's former One Life to Live characters. After Brennan formally met Ronnie, Carly Spencer popped up and complained about Ronnie's Mance trade forcing Michael out of the house. Giovanni Gio Palmieri also heard the news that Ronnie was dealing the Quartermaine Hearthstone to Drew and tried to talk her out of it. At Lulu Spencer's place, Lucy Coe disregarded with Tracy before averring that a house was just a house and the recollections would live on in her heart. In Professor Henry Hank Dalton's office, Jen Sidwell said Dalton was being replaced due to lack of progress and revealed that he worked for Britt now. Britt was present for this discussion and got a pitch from Dalton after Sidwell took off. Dalton suggested they could cut Sidwell out of the equation and pursue an economic occasion without him. Once Emma Scorpio Drake popped up, she was stupefied to see the Britch and questioned why Britt was there with Dalton. Meanwhile, Martin Gray stopped by Laura's office and admitted he'd gone back to working for Drew. There was also some talk about Measure C before Martin exited. After Lulu came to Laura for advice regarding her kitties, she headed to Bobby's and heard Brennan's proposition. Brennan said Valentine Cassadine wanted another visit with Charlotte Cassadine, but Lulu didn't want to keep dismembering her son's life with Switzerland passages. Brennan wondered if Lulu would feel else if Valentine was transferred stateside, so Carly looked pleased over effects going according to plan. Back with Laura, she got a visit from Sidwell, who suggested about working together to save Port Charles. At the Quartermaine Manse, Michael made a sincere plea to Ronnie and offered to pay further than Drew for the house. Since Ronnie refused to vend to Michael, he knew this had to be about commodity other than the plutocrat. Ronnie sounded a bit shaken up as she plotted to keep a grip on her feelings. After Ronnie confessed there was indeed commodity differently going on, she suggested about being in too deep and felt she must vend to Drew. Still, Ronnie stopped suddenly of admitting the details and turned her attention to Drew as well as Martin when they arrived. Drew inked the papers for the Mance and awaited for Ronnie to put her hand down next. At Lulu's house again, she looked through further boxes and was stunned when she stumbled across Monica's real will. General Hospital spoilers say Tracy will plan to shut down Drew's Mance purchase soon enough, so stay tuned. At the center of this solemn gathering was Lucy Coe, a woman whose life had been a spectacular roller coaster of schemes, passions, and redemptions. Today, however, she was the picture of serene grandmotherly devotion. Holding her grandchild, swaddled in a delicate, heirloom gown, she looked every bit the matriarch anchoring her family in faith. Beside her stood Martin Gray, her fiancé, his usually sardonic and lawyerly demeanor softened into something approaching genuine reverence. The cynical glint in his eye had been replaced by a softness that few in Port Charles would believe existed. The priest, a gentle man unaware of the tectonic pressures building just beneath the surface of this ceremony, began to speak. His words were ancient, soothing, a balm on the raw nerves of the assembled. Today, we gather to welcome this child into the light, to wash away the past, and to look forward to a future filled with grace and love. For Lucy, each word was a prayer answered. This was more than a ritual, it was a line drawn in the sand. It was a declaration that the child, and by extension, her own life with Martin, would be defined not by the shadows of their history, but by the light of this moment. She glanced at Martin, her heart swelling with a love that felt both hard-won and terrifyingly vulnerable. He met her gaze and gave a slight, reassuring nod, his hand finding hers and squeezing it. It was an unspoken promise, a silent vow that he was here, he was present, and he was committed to this new path they were forging together. These were the encouraging words, not just from the priest's liturgy, but from the silent language of their shared looks and touches. It was the encouragement of a shared future, a mutual agreement to believe in the goodness of this day. The icy drip of doubt, a threat in the pew. But the harmony of the moment was a fragile illusion. Sitting a few pews back, his posture rigid and his jaw clenched so tight it ached, was Cyrus Renaud. Cyrus, Martin's half-brother, a man whose soul was a cathedral of bitterness and whose faith was a weapon to be wielded, not a comfort to be received. He watched the scene with an expression of cold, detached amusement that barely concealed the volcano of rage simmering beneath. To Cyrus, the baptism was not a sacred event, it was a farce, a blasphemous pantomime. He saw Martin's softened demeanor as the ultimate betrayal, a betrayal of their shared, tainted blood, a betrayal of the ruthless pragmatism that had, in Cyrus's twisted worldview, always been their survival mechanism. How dare Martin play the part of the doting family man? How dare he believe he could simply wash his hands of the past, a past that was as much a part of him as his own DNA? As the priest spoke of being cleansed from sin, a low, guttural sound almost escaped Cyrus's throat. Sin, he thought. Martin wanted to be cleansed? He would show him what it meant to be truly exposed. The encouraging words of the ceremony were, to his ears, a personal provocation. Each mention of new life felt like a mockery of the stagnant, vengeful existence to which Cyrus was committed. He leaned over to the formidable woman beside him, Laura Collins, the mayor of Port Charles, and his words were not a whisper, but a blade of ice carefully unsheathed. A beautiful sentiment, isn't it, Laura? He murmured, his voice devoid of all warmth. The idea that water can wash away a lifetime of filth. It's a comforting fairy tale for children. But some stains are indelible. Laura stiffened, turning a fraction to look at him. She saw the naked menace in his eyes. This was no philosophical observation, it was a threat. It was an angry threat, coiled and venomous, delivered in the hushed tones of a holy place to maximize its chilling effect. He was letting her know, and by extension anyone else powerful enough to hear, that the page was not going to be turned. Not today. Not ever. The baptism might be beginning, but Cyrus was there to ensure that Martin's judgment day was arriving right along with it. The calm before the storm, a final moment of illusion. Back at the front, oblivious to the venom being exchanged in the pews, the ceremony reached its apex. The priest took the child from Lucy's arms. With a gentle hand, he cupped the water and let it trickle over the baby's forehead. I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. The water, cool and pure, marked the child's skin. A collective, soft sigh seemed to pass through the small crowd of well-wishers. For Lucy, it was the culmination of everything. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of profound relief and joy. This was it. The fresh start. The past was, symbolically at least, drowned in those few drops of water. Martin, watching the water trace a path down his future grandchild's face, felt a surprising lump form in his own throat. For a man who had made a career out of navigating moral gray areas, this moment of pure, unadulterated goodness was almost disorienting. It felt real. It felt like something worth changing for, worth fighting for. He allowed himself, for just a second, to believe in the fairy tale. He allowed himself to think that perhaps a man like him could be redeemed, that the mistakes of his past could be left behind like a discarded coat. He looked at Lucy's tear-streaked, radiant face and made a silent, fervent vow to himself. This is it. No more cutting corners. No more deals in the dark. From this day forward, I will be the man she sees in me. They were the most sincere, encouraging words he had ever spoken to himself, a personal mantra born from the sanctity of the moment. The priest concluded the rite, smiling warmly at the family. This child is now a child of God, sealed and marked as Christ's own forever. The small congregation began to stir, ready to offer their congratulations, to celebrate this moment of peace. The atmosphere was one of collective exhalation. The baptism was complete. The new beginning was officially, ceremonially, underway. The shattering, when the sacred is profaned. But in Port Charles, peace is a fleeting visitor, and new beginnings are often just the prelude to a more dramatic ending. The chapel doors, which had been closed to preserve the sanctity of the service, were suddenly thrown open with a force that was anything but reverent. The sound echoed through the quiet chapel like a gunshot, shattering the fragile peace. All heads turned. Silhouetted against the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital corridor stood two figures whose very presence spelled the end of innocence, Detectives Harrison Chase and Dante Falconeri. Their faces were set in grim, professional masks, their postures radiating an authority that brooked no argument. They were not here for a baptism. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the chapel. Lucy's smile froze on her face, then slowly melted away, replaced by a dawning horror. Her grip on Martin's arm tightened instinctively, her knuckles turning white. The encouraging words of moments before evaporated from her mind, replaced by a silent, screaming question. Martin's own transformation was instantaneous and profound. The soft, sentimental man of just seconds ago was gone. In his place was the shrewd, cornered lawyer, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the threat. The mask of the redeemed man slipped, and the face of a survivor peered out from beneath it. The baptismal water on his skin felt suddenly cold, not cleansing, but accusatory. Chase took a few steps into the chapel, his voice cutting through the tension, formal and unyielding. Martin Gray? The use of his full name, in that tone, in this place, was a profanity. It was a brutal reminder that the outside world, with all its laws and consequences, did not respect the sanctity of a chapel or the significance of a baptism. Martin straightened his suit jacket, a gesture of pure defiance. "Detectives," he replied, his voice remarkably steady, though a slight tremor betrayed him. "As you can see, you're interrupting a private family ceremony. Whatever this is, it can wait." Dante stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "I'm afraid it can't, Mr. Gray." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on everyone in the room. "Martin Gray, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of Cyrus Renaud." The words landed not with a bang, but with a sickening, silent crush. Attempted murder. The air was sucked out of the room. The holy space was suddenly, violently, transformed into a crime scene. Lucy let out a small, choked cry. "No. Martin, no." It was a whisper of pure devastation. Her encouraging world, built on the foundation of this day, crumbled into dust around her. The new beginning had lasted less than a minute. From his pew, Cyrus did not smile. He didn't need to. The slow, satisfied spread of his expression was more powerful than any grin. It was the look of a man who had orchestrated a symphony of ruin and was now enjoying its final, devastating chord. His angry threat, whispered minutes before, had not been an empty one. It was a promise, and it was being fulfilled in the most public and humiliating way imaginable. The unraveling, a firing and a fractured future. The scene that followed was one of controlled chaos. As Chase recited the Miranda rights, "You have the right to remain silent," the words clashed grotesquely with the echoes of the baptismal liturgy that still seemed to hang in the air. "A member of the household of God. Versus anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." It was a brutal juxtaposition of salvation and condemnation. Martin, ever the performer, maintained a shred of his composure. He turned to Lucy, his face a mask of anguish and apology. Lucy, I don't believe this. This is a mistake. It's Cyrus, But he wasn't allowed to finish. Dante was already guiding him, a firm hand on his arm, toward the doors. The congregation was on its feet, a sea of stunned faces. The child, sensing the shift in atmosphere, began to whimper, the sound a heartbreaking counterpoint to the detective's official tones. As Martin was led away, he locked eyes with Cyrus. It was not a look of pleading, but of pure, undiluted hatred. The fraternal bond, always strained, was now severed completely, replaced by a vow of mutual destruction. The baptism had begun in hope, but it was ending in the genesis of a new, more personal war. The fallout was immediate and merciless. The news didn't just spread through Port Charles, it exploded. And in the real world, a parallel drama was reaching its own conclusion. The arrest of Martin Gray became the catalyst for another, more final severance. In a sleek, impersonal office at the ABC network, a meeting was taking place. It was a meeting about ratings, about public image, about the long-term narrative trajectory of General Hospital. And the narrative for Martin Gray, as played by the esteemed Michael E. Knight, had reached its end. The character was too tainted, the storyline too dark for a redemption that the powers that be were no longer interested in exploring. The phone call to Michael E. Knight was not dramatic. It was corporate. It was a conversation filled with the sterile, discouraging words of the entertainment industry, creative direction, budgetary considerations, the evolution of the canvas. The encouraging words he had received over the years for his nuanced, scene-stealing performance were now null and void. The angry threats his character had made and received had finally bled into his real-life career. He was officially fired. The news hit the public, and the dedicated fans of the show, with the force of a tidal wave. Martin Gray was not just going to prison, he was being written out, erased from the story of Port Charles. Michael E. Knight, an actor who had brought immense depth and wit to the canvas, was being let go. The aftermath, echoes in a vacuum. Back in the now empty chapel, Lucy Coe stood alone. The guests had dispersed, murmuring their awkward condolences. The priest had retreated, shaken. The only evidence of the celebration that was supposed to be were the now wilted flowers at the altar and the lingering, haunting smell of holy water. She looked at the baptismal font, the water inside still and clear, reflecting the stained glass windows above. It had promised cleansing, but it had delivered only a deeper stain. The encouraging words of the ceremony now felt like a cruel joke. The angry threats of Cyrus Renaud were the only truth that remained. Her phone buzzed incessantly, friends, reporters, colleagues. But one notification stood out. A news alert, Michael E. Knight officially fired from General Hospital. The finality of it struck her. This wasn't just a storyline, this was the end. The character of Martin Gray, the man she had loved, the future she had envisioned, was being terminated in every sense of the word. The actor who had given him life was being cast out. The fiction and reality had collided with devastating consequences. In that silent chapel, Lucy realized that a baptism was only a beginning if the world allowed it to be. But in a world governed by angry threats, vengeful brothers, and corporate indifference, some new beginnings are stillborn. The water had been poured, the words had been spoken, but the past refused to be washed away. It had simply waited at the door, handcuffs at the ready, to ensure that the only thing being buried that day was not sin, but hope itself. The promise of the font had been drowned in the cold, hard reality of the arrest and the firing. And all that was left was the echo of a threat fulfilled and the chilling silence of a future that would never be.